Hello friends, welcome to the Seated Scribe, a channel where we discuss pens and writing, and I am Rudrashish Dotto. Friends, as fountain pen enthusiasts, we are often asked a recurring question: which is the pen that we would recommend to any person who wish to embark on a journey with fountain pens? While the choice of brands for recommendation are an intensely personal area, my experience suggests that my recommendation of a particular variety of the Japanese pen manufacturer Pilot has not been met with a negative feedback even once in the 22 years or so of my recommendation to a wide section of the recommended population, from students to young professionals to writers. However, while I have uniformly recommended the Pilot Metropolitan as the go-to pen for a starter enthusiast, what has left me bothered more is that buyers have often been confused as to the nib width or variety that would suit their purpose as first-time users of fountain pens. A Pilot Metropolitan with a fine, a medium, or a 1 mm stub nib are the usual options a buyer has to negotiate always. And in today's review, I will engage with each of the nib width variations so as to help the buyers with an informed choice about their first purchase, because I do not wish a first time buyer of a Pilot Metropolitan to waste resources in trial and error purchase. Friends, without any further delay, let us go to the comparative writing experiences of the fine, the medium, and the 1 mm stub nib variations of the Pilot Metropolitan. Well, friends, I have quickly unboxed all the three pens with three different nib widths. This is the fine, this is the medium, and this is the 1 mm stub. Now, the usual choice or the difficulty of choices usually is between a fine and a medium, because a 1 mm stub nib is designed, as we will see, only for calligraphy type writing. So this may not be suitable for everyday carries, but nevertheless we'll be examining the width of a stub nib of 1 mm as well. Now friends, with regard to the structural aspects of a Pilot Metropolitan and the reason why we love recommending Pilot Metropolitan to a first time user is because it ticks most of the right boxes of the requirements of a first time user. The first is the entire body is metallic, it's very tough and can easily take in hits, falls and knocks without any effective damage to the pen. The size as well as the shape is no nonsense and utilitarian. The clips are fairly stiff, functional, and perform their work very well. These pens are usually not threaded but friction shut, all the three. And in each of the three pens, usually Pilot puts in these rubber sacks these rubber sacks, they are made in-house by Pilot, and as you can see, if I can focus it for you, they are Pilot made in Japan. This is made of rubber. It holds quite a substantial amount of ink, and one question which we often get asked is whether these rubber sacks can withstand the rigors of let's say pigmentings or the conventional iron gall inks. Friends, I have experienced issues with rubber sacks after a couple of years of use, and I would recommend that in case these rubber sacks develop problems of any nature, we can shift from this filling mechanism to the Conforti proprietary converters of Pilot. So this is something that I would recommend to any user who may develop issues with the rubber sack, because clearly a Pilot Metropolitan is meant to last for decades. So, but this rubber sack may not last that long, and a Conforti converter, though it would be a very small converter compared to most of the conventional converters that we use, but nevertheless that may serve our purpose in case the rubber sack is compromised. So this is an issue that I wish to share with you, friends, and that will be valid for all the three nib width variations. And with regard to the barrel is solid metal. This is solid metal, as we can see, even the threads are metallic. So one of the primary reasons, as I have said, friends, that we love recommending a Pilot Metropolitan is because of the price. In the Indian market it is sub 2000 rupees, and if we take an approximate value of 80 rupees to a US dollar, we can easily surmise how much it would cost in the US or the European markets. So this is the first reason that we recommend. The second reason is obviously the Pilot reliability. Every single Pilot Metropolitan that is sold goes through the rigors of the Pilot quality control, and we would hardly get a case where a user ends up getting dissatisfied with the Pilot Metropolitan that they have bought. The third reason is a Pilot Metropolitan usually has a very user friendly gripping section. There is a flare at the end, after which there is a gradual dip. At this point we have the narrowest part of thickness of the pen, after which it gradually flares up in two different step ups, leading to a millimeter or so step up at this point, after which it gradually tapers down to the finial of the barrel end. So therefore, since this length is fairly long, any user with any sort of likings for widths or thickness can adjust their grips accordingly with a single pen. So this is something which I find many users commenting favorably upon, that they can usually grip that part of the gripping section which appears to give them greater control over the pen. So these are the three main reasons why I, for example, would recommend a Pilot Metropolitan as a first time user. But nevertheless, this is not to suggest that there are other pen companies who would be falling short of quality issues or issues that would favor recommendations to first time users. It just happened that in my case, my first time pen, fountain pen, was a Pilot Metropolitan, and I have never had any single case of a person coming back to me telling that they are dissatisfied with their buy of a Pilot Metropolitan, other than their choice of nibs, which is the reason why I have felt that it's important that buyers are given, or potential buyers are given, an idea as to how thick or thin the fine, the medium, and the stub nib writes under actual writing circumstances. So friends, this is all that I had to tell you with regard to the structural aspects of the pen. We will now ink up this pen with one of my favorite inks, the Diamond Imperial Blue, and see how the pen fares under actual writing circumstances. Well friends, I have already inked up these three pens with the Diamond Imperial Blue, and now we'll test each of the three pens, beginning with the black colored pen, which is actually the fine nib version of the Pilot Metropolitan. Friends, the fine nib version of the Pilot Metropolitan will give you a certain amount of feedback while we are writing under usual writing circumstances, and it's not a scratchy type of a feedback, but nevertheless, since as we know the nib widths of typical Japanese pens are slightly narrower than the Western nib widths of the same standard. For example, a Japanese fine would be narrower or finer than a Western or a European fine. So this is perhaps the reason why a Japanese fine like this pen will give a certain amount of feedback on paper, but this feedback is actually loved by some users who tend to believe that they wish to get the feel of using a writing pen, using a fountain pen on paper. With regard to the nib width variations of the fine nib, friends, this is a stiff steel nib, so I do not detect significant nib width variations even when writing under pressure. It's the upstrokes, the downstrokes, and the slant strokes are of equal thickness. With regard to the wetness of the pens, friends, well, even under usual writing circumstances, they tend to be a bit wetter, and this is never an issue because it's not a gushingly wet pen, but nevertheless this is the standard thickness of the Pilot Metropolitan fine. Now we'll go on to the medium, which, as you can see, will be somewhat different from the fine in terms of thickness. As you can see, perhaps the medium is marginally thicker than the fine, obviously, but it does transfer a greater amount of ink onto the paper, and the feedback that we had with the fine version of the Pilot Metropolitan is missing. So I am essentially getting a gliding experience with the Pilot Metropolitan medium in the Diamond Imperial Blue, and this is also a wet pen with no nib width variations of any nature. It's a stiff steel nib, but it's wet. The upstrokes are also almost equally wet compared to the downstrokes. So friends, this is the medium. I do hope that you are getting a visual impression of the difference between a fine and a medium of the Pilot Metropolitan. Now we go on to the 1 millimeter stub nib. This is usually meant for calligraphy, but nevertheless, I have seen users who have used this 1 millimeter stub nib under usual writing circumstances as well, in contexts where thickness of letters does not matter much. With regard to this nib, as we will see, the horizontal strokes are thinner, as is the case with most calligraphy nibs. The vertical strokes are thicker. For example, this is how the stub nib works. As you can see, this will be most pronounced in line width variation tests. The horizontal strokes are very thin, the vertical strokes are the thickest. So this is the actual authentic calligraphy nib for you. But let me tell you friends, I have seen people using the stub nib of a Pilot Metropolitan under usual writing circumstances as well, where an element of cursiveness in writing is sought for or desired. So for users who may be using the stub nib for ordinary writing circumstances, maybe a cursive writing context would be more appropriate for the 1 millimeter stub nib. Otherwise, it's either going to be a choice between the fine or the medium version. With regard to the thickness, the medium is slightly thicker than the fine. The other experience-wise difference is that, friends, there is a certain amount of feedback with the Pilot Metropolitan fine when one is writing. This feedback is totally absent in the Pilot Metropolitan medium. So these are the three choices which usually first time buyers are faced with while buying the Pilot Metropolitan, and it depends to a significant extent on personal choices, personal preferences, availability of colors. These pens are made available by Pilot in various colors and various thematic designs. So it's entirely up to individual users to make an informed choice with regard to a pen that is surely going to last them several decades with active use. Thank you friends for watching this edition of the Seated Scribe. I hope I have been able to clarify certain important issues with regard to choices of the nib width variations in the Pilot Metropolitan, so that prospective buyers or users may make informed choices before procuring or buying a pen. Thank you friends once again for watching. Keep safe, and we'll be back with another review in a few days. Goodbye.